Shanti. Thank you very much, and it's my honor to be here in Poland, in Warsaw. It's my first visit, I hope not the last. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and thank you. I created a little mantra for myself, happy in chaos, and it works very nicely. The study and practice of Raja Yoga as taught in the Brahma Kumaris involves ideas more than anything else. And the ideas that people operate on conventionally are challenged quite substantially. And I, being of a out-of-the-box type person, will take it pretty far. And something that I find myself talking about a lot is the need to move away from something that I call toxic conventional morality. You probably haven't heard that term before. But anyway, what I mean by that, just take a simple expression, things should not be done like that. We have this word should not. And you probably use it yourself quite a bit. It shouldn't be like this, it should be like that. Yes? Should, ought, must, have to. So my question is, who says? And the answer to that question is in any society there are the thought leaders in any society. And generally speaking, the thought leaders would be the patriarchs, who look at life and look at the big picture and work out ways to make things good. That's the duty of a patriarch, isn't it? To see how to make everything right. And out of that comes the conventional social attitudes. So what I found is that it worked very nicely for a few thousand years, and then at some point it stopped working and perhaps even backfired. And so I looked at that observation with the aim of trying to find patterns in it. I'm a type of person who's looking for patterns everywhere, and I do find them. And I found that everything goes nicely until it doesn't. Like so many things in life. In the Indian scriptures and in the Quran and the Bible and not really in the Buddhist scriptures, but in the theistic scriptures, you find also indicators of the end of the world. And they tend to coincide with each other. And they also correspond to all the things we should not do, because if we do, it'll be the end of the world. And there's a list of them. I won't go through the whole list because I can't remember it, but one of them is food being sold in small packets, or when women cut their hair, or dress as men, or vice versa. Even in Dante it's in there. And what I also see is a tremendous increase in frequency of epochal change, and particularly maybe the 20th century, and then the 21st century is doubling and tripling and all that. So in circumstances of great change, the setup, the conventional systems that were set up, they're not able to function well when things are changing. For example, it is possible to buy a car that flies, but they couldn't figure out the traffic rules, so they couldn't bring it out. But sooner or later, we will be moving around in flying cars. I don't know where they will keep the traffic lights, but we've already got a big problem with drones because there are no rules. I mean, there are some, but nobody really bothers with them. So they kind of crash. They've even been training eagles to catch them and bring them down when they stray into the wrong areas. Do you know about this? It's quite interesting. They can train eagles to catch a drone, and it's quite good. So all of the social media, you can't really create nice, good rules for proper use of social media. So it goes totally out of hand. And these are just things that are happening in our ordinary everyday life, to say nothing of all the social attitudes that have resulted in this kind of wars. I'm not just talking about the wars which involve guns and tanks and all of that, but there's a kind of war going on between men and women. Have you noticed? Husbands and wives, males and females. And since men are from Mars and women are from Venus, it's fairly not surprising, but it's very hard for men and women to coexist. And the conventional moral injunction that follow the instruction of your husband, it no longer works. So all this has to be refigured out. There's a war going on between humanity and nature, big war. There is very few fish in the ocean because they're not given time to reproduce. And so there's vast cubic kilometers where there is absolutely no life whatsoever in the ocean. And the coral reefs, which are the fundaments of the food chain, are dying, bleached out. So within 10 years, even if you do nothing else, there will be no more food because of the compromise. Breatharians, that's a good way to go. At least we'll lose the overweight problem, which is because of the genetically modified wheat and everything. That's the main cause. So the war between East and West, between North and South, between children and adults, between the races, between the religions, between, so basically we're in a world that is collapsing and destroying itself, and many people are destroying themselves through addictions and through various other destructive practices. And I, in my research, say, and it's not scientific, but it's more philosophical, that the culprit here is the idea that the system of morality will solve the problem. That's over. So we have to look at it differently. for example, people will say, in general, especially in the medical profession, pain is bad. We don't like pain. If you get pain, get an aspirin. If that doesn't work, get a codeine. If that doesn't work, go for opioids. If you get addicted to that, so it goes. Pain, in my experience, is one of the greatest teachers. And there's a wonderful expression that's used in addiction recovery: no pain, no gain. Have you heard that? Of course, nobody likes the pain, but we still are beginning to learn that pain is a messenger, and it's letting you know that something wrong. And when you override it with medication or denial or addiction or whatever it is, then what will pain do? It will increase intensity until you get the message or die, whichever comes first. So basically there are these systems in place to let us know that we are going in the wrong direction. And I thought it was quite interesting that I think one of the last slides on the slideshow you played from the Future of Power series, that if we don't go for the Indian way, there will be no way, something like that. Do you remember that little statement? And so what is the Indian way? Well, part of my studies have been the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which are the great epics of India, and of course they are paralleled with the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Edda and all of these epics that exist in different cultures in different parts of the world, and which are holding secret keys to unlock the message held in the myths and fairy tales and all of this, which carry secret information. Nobody knows what it is, but at least they carry it from generation to generation until we can finally unlock it. So now everybody has a conscience, right? Nobody here who doesn't have a conscience, I hope. But the thing is, how often on a daily basis do you go against it? Is Vivek. Yeah. And Gewissen in German, and I have no idea what it is in Polish. But sumienie. Okay, that's my first Polish word. Very. Yeah. So I really, really give a lot of importance to conscience. And I ask this question: how many times per day, on average, do you think you go against your conscience? Right? About half a dozen times, right? On a daily basis. Now if you multiply that by 365, multiply that by your age minus about 4 or 5, because your first 4 or 5 years doesn't count. That's a lot of times you've gone against your conscience. And your conscience is not somebody else telling you do this and you say, no, I'm not going to, which is completely logical if you don't agree with it. But I don't think we can disagree with the voice of conscience, even though we go against it. So what is the reason why we go against the voice of conscience? So I gave myself this question to meditate and contemplate on for a few months, and I came up with the thought that, you know what, contrary to popular view, doing the right thing costs more than doing the wrong thing. They say it doesn't cost you anything to do the right thing. Not true. Huh? Yes, I will try. Sometimes I can't. Well, doing the right thing is more expensive than doing the wrong thing. And most people think, and they've been told by the great external moral authorities, who are, just in parentheses, first of all, your parents. They tell you, do this, don't do that, this is right, this is wrong, and as long as you'll listen. And then they send you to school, and your teachers become the next set of people who tell you, do this, don't do this, and they will make sure that you get the message by a certain amount of corporal punishment or some other kind of punishment. And then the third set of people who explain to us what is right and wrong are the religious leaders. And so we, throughout our lives, are hearing these messages which are passed from generation to generation, which I call the external moral authorities. And one of the problems I have with external moral authorities is that they tend to not do what they say that the other people should do. And so it generates a certain amount of hypocrisy. So then the other problem I have with conventional morality, which is why I call it toxic, is because it tends to be punitive. And I had a wonderful occasion a few years ago. I had written a whole bunch of books about values, and then I was asked to go all over India and talk to school children. So I had a group of 2,000 16-year-old Indian schoolboys sitting in a gigantic stadium, and I asked them, little boys always want to do the wrong thing, of course, so I asked them, did your fathers ever beat you? Oh yes, definitely. Okay, that's good. And they beat you because you did the wrong thing, right? Yes, definitely. And did you learn from that beating that that was wrong? Oh no, we knew already. So I said to them, well, if you want to do the wrong thing and you don't want to get beaten for it, what should you do? Oh, they said, blame somebody else. So, getting people to be moral through corporal punishment is counterproductive. It doesn't work. No point. It's obsolete. No use. Then I found that the rules of conventional morality tend to be stacked against women, children, animals, plants, and stones, and for the patriarchal elite. And so it's not a level playing field. So I have another problem with that. And then I found that it also tends towards corruption. So that's another problem. So I have all these problems with toxic conventional morality, and in exchange I would propose following the voice of conscience, which, as you know, is difficult. Truth tends to be humiliating, at least embarrassing, and people say, I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but as soon as you start saying it, don't tell me that. I do not want to hear that. Have a look at a film called The Whistleblower, which was all about the tobacco industry. Have you seen it, anybody? What happens when somebody tells the truth and it's economically inconvenient? What happens? Quite a lot. So in this way I thought, well, you want to change the world, this is an angle, this is an avenue. Let us see if we can follow our conscience. So of course it has to start with the self, as Sister Helena was telling us. So now, what do you need in order to follow the voice of conscience? The first thing you need is you need to realize that you reincarnate. And in India, most people think that they reincarnate, and so that's easy. Now, the thing about reincarnation is that when you leave your body and you get the next one, you're still the same you. You don't get a different self. You get a different body, but you're the same self. Which means you kind of continue. And so, in the Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata, it tells you very clearly in the second chapter that you cannot be destroyed. You are imperishable, indestructible. That's it. You will live forever, and you have to live with yourself forever. So being right with yourself is probably, to me anyway, the most important of all possible things in terms of priority, because I do not have to live with you for eternity, but I do have to live with me. And so if I'm right with myself, that's very important. Much more important than being famous or whatever, rich. So the only way to be right with the self is to create a good relationship with your conscience. Now, conscience is like a machine. And you know what happens to your car if you drive it with your foot on both the accelerator and the brake. It's going to brake. So, every time that you go against your own conscience, not anybody else, your own, it loses functionality a little bit. And when you do that for a number of lifetimes, you can imagine that it's no longer going to serve you well. So, while your conscience has a reduced functionality, you have no choice but to follow the injunctions of conventional morality, even if it doesn't work. Otherwise, you're nowhere, you know. So, now the other thing that we do in the kind of yoga that I do, which involves the focus of attention, and the objects of focus of attention that we do in this particular kind of yoga, is the first thing you focus on is yourself. And your self is described as a very tiny point of light, so it's easy to focus on it. And a point is the one and only thing in science which doesn't have any dimension and cannot be measured. It's a geometrical phenomenon. So that is the thing that goes, or that enables you to go from the dimension of matter to the dimension of spirit, we could say, or non-matter. Point. And of course photography was discovered with that. So that's really nice. The camera obscura. Have you seen a camera obscura? It's so amazing. Anyway, did you ever wonder why Vermeer's paintings are the way they are? Maybe you didn't. Anyway, a little secret. He used the camera obscura and he painted exactly in the same way as a camera sees, because of this little point hole of light. And so this was discovered and demonstrated. Now, your self is the spiritual component of your mind-body-spirit combination. And your conscience, according to us, is in the spirit, not in the brain. So your conscience is a faculty of your capacity for consciousness that can tell the difference between good, bad, right, wrong, useful, useless, profitable, unprofitable, which corresponds also to your intellectual capability. So in Hindi we say the buddhi. Vivek and Buddhi are very near to each other. So that is the first step. You concentrate on yourself, and the day-to-day practice of not going against your conscience is the most effective, according to me, way to increase your willpower. Because I think that sometimes when you are facing some moral dilemma, you may say, well, what do they say? The flesh is strong and the spirit is weak, something like that. Or they say, would if I could, but I can't. In other words, there is no power. And the power of the will is what gets eroded in all forms of addiction. So I did quite a lot of work in addiction, so I came to be able to maybe reduce the very terrible impact of addiction on family life. So if you have powerful will, then you can do what you want, when you want, if you want, and not if you don't want. And then you will never make an excuse, because excuses are always because you forgot, or it was too hard, or would if I could, but I couldn't, like that. So these are little methods, very practical things. So now, then, how do you know what's right? It's a difficult question to answer, because as soon as it comes into law, it's sort of out of date, because there are new things that come up, and laws are always made about something there wasn't a law about until it went wrong, and then you make a law about it, and there's too many laws. Just in Judaism, there's 600 basic laws. I mean, if you can remember them all. So better for Christianity, just love God and love each other. That's easier. Don't need 2 laws. But then how do you interpret that? Of course, love is a very important principle, and one of the fundamental attributes of the human soul. And then also the second object of concentration is God. You see, of course we're not allowed to say God, but I just did. What is God? Who is God? Is God there or not? This is a very big question that people ask. And sometimes people say, well, we don't want to use the word God because it's got a load on it and it's masculine, this and that. So we use euphemisms like the divine or something else. But you could say the Supreme Spirit, that might work. Anyway, that too is in the form of a point. So when you're focusing attention, first of all on the self, which is a point, and second of all on the Supreme Soul, which is also a point, outside the dimension of matter, both of them, it's difficult. You said it's a bit out of range. It's way out of range, but we do it anyway. And the thing is, you just keep working on it. And if you do, you get it more and more accurately. And there's a tremendous amount of resistance. And I think it hasn't been mentioned so much when we've been talking about yoga, the resistance. I mean, if you're doing physical yoga, you get plenty of resistance. You have to get through the resistance. And taking up a practice, unless you've got really good willpower or you're destined to do it, is quite hard. But when you want to do focusing on yourself and then focus on a divine supreme soul point that's both of whom are outside the material world, then you have to do a lot of thinking about what is and what might be, and then analogies and good and evil and life and death and all of those big questions. So, to me, yoga is a word that means the union or the communion between a self and the divine in the context of a chaotic world where most things don't make any sense, where none of the shoulds, have tos, and musts are functioning, and there's all these questions that you mentioned. Why is there so much poverty? Why is there so much injustice? Of course, we also learn about the mathematics of karma, which is the most fascinating thing. And that is also there. But do you know the very interesting thing about the Gita and the Mahabharata? The conclusion of the Gita is that all the bad guys go to heaven and all the good guys go to hell. And they say, what? What is this? What kind of conclusion is this? Right? So strange. Then the conclusion of the Ramayana is that as long as you are following the voice of conventional morality, you will regret, you will fail, and everything will be not okay. Is it right? It is right for those who know. And these are the great scriptures which are the foundation of all the other scriptures. And so, has humanity got some screw loose or what, and we have to consider these questions, that how did the great sages of the past come up with this? And they have to be true, because one of the definitions of truth in Hindu philosophy is something that persists. And they've been going for many thousands of years, and everybody reads them and listens to them, and nobody understands much, but they carry on, reading and listening and having very strong reactions, emotions, and the arts are all about that, and a lot of the sciences. And so here we have this puzzle, this ethical dilemmas, this tremendous conflict between the voice of conscience, the voice of God, and the voice of conventional morality. Nobody's agreeing, but we're still here, and we're still alive just. Is that right? So, what's next? That's really the question. What's next? So, my answer to it is, silence is good for that, because when you're in silence, the example of silence that I will just give you is Nelson Mandela. He was in prison in solitary confinement for 27 years on a little island off of Cape, in South Africa, shark-infested waters, and 27 years sitting in a cell about the size of this stage, with one wall being totally open, no heating or cooling, regardless of the weather, and can't talk to anybody, not allowed to read or write or anything, so all he could do was think. And when he became free, he was asked if there was anything he regretted about his time in prison, and he said, well, I regret that I don't have time to think anymore. Yeah, there's so many interpretations of yoga, but one of them is to be still, to be silent, to be internalized and just beyond thought. And in such a state, your mind is going all over the place, right? And so everything else is going all over the place as well, because everything starts in the mind. Something about war begins in the minds of men. But when you make your mind still, then I think you start to see the patterns or the waves or the way things work. And in the yoga that I do, we talk about virtues and we talk about powers. So if you have conscience that you listen to, and that restoration of the loss of functionality causes you to have very big willpower, then you cultivate your virtues. Everybody has some virtues, right? It is said God is the ocean of virtues, so you have some pieces of that in you. And then the pieces that you don't have, somebody else has. So if you cultivate your own and you pick up the virtues of other people, then you have a good chance of having a good, well-rounded bunch of virtues. And then the other thing you need is power, endurance. You have to be able to handle pain, humiliation. You have to be able to get people to cooperate with you, cooperate with other people. You have to be a good judge of character. You have to be able to discern what's real, what's not real, what's a lie, who's real, who's trustworthy, all of these things, powers. You have to have the power to let go. Like there's many powers. So to me, if it's very chaotic and you do this, I think you'll be able to navigate your way through and come out the other side with a sense of, I think especially being able to interpret circumstances that are in everybody else's view bad, or situations or events or incidents. This is a bad thing. But in this type of yoga we will look at everything and find out the hidden good. This silver lining in the cloud. And when you learn how to do this, I think it does enable you to find order in the chaos and to be a person of order who doesn't go out of order with a little bit or a large amount of chaos. And you then, I think, become the foundation stones or building blocks of a world where you do make sense of everything, and it comes into order because you yourself are not reacting against it, but that you're interpreting it to your advantage and everybody else's advantage. And there's this wonderful saying that comes, I think, from the Sikh scriptures, which is that when you rise, everybody else rises too. Is that right? Terevane Sarva Kabala, something like that. So thank you very much, and let us just have a moment of silence to... Okay.